Social change is also a constant. We now have a return to the cities statistically. We've got more people moving into the cities than out of them. Anybody expect that after what happened for the prior 50 years? Kind of quite a reversal. We've got an evaporating middle class in the United States. I'm not going to dwell on this point. We have more women in college than men. How many of these things did anybody predict? And who would have predicted the variety of ethnic restaurants that you could find in Louisville these days? I mean, it's really quite remarkable. When I came here in 1988, you could pick which one of the fast food restaurants you want. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly, but certainly things have changed. We've got other kinds of social convolutions. Anybody expect the new women's sports heroes that we had and that little celebration? Thank you, Brandy Chastain. And now we have new forms of protest. I don't know whether you can see exactly what this is, but this was a protest in France over the fact that milk prices were too low. And this was a new use of a weapon. I don't know whether this individual got arrested for firing upon a police officer, but these are new things that are happening. And by the way, this just happened in the last 2 weeks. I was just lucky to be able to find a photograph. So we have economic change. Do I need to tell you about it? You know this stuff as well as I do. Now we have this Recovery Act. And this Recovery Act has got billions of dollars, some of which are earmarked for energy and climate. You know how much Kentucky's getting compared to other states? Not much. You know why? Because we're not trying to get it. We've got competition from China, Brazil, India. They add to emissions. You see what the problem is. But we forget that, yes, they're emitting. They're also converting over to energy efficiency at a rate faster than any place else on the planet. And oh, by the way, the majority of the silicon photovoltaic cells in the world are now produced in China. Its greatest competitor, India. Do we really want all that competition to be overseas, or would we like to have more of it here? But the US economy has been a little bit distracted, we understand that. If you can't read that little note there, it says bonus. That was somebody obviously getting a nice little message. And electricity costs keep rising. This isn't me, this is Kentucky Energy Watch last year. Now, I can assure you that the average homeowner, the average occupant, the average household in Kentucky did not have a wage increase of 8% between 2005 and 2006. This is a way of producing poverty, people, by raising costs. If your utility rates go up substantially, what happens to your ability to pay your mortgage? I submit it goes down. The average electricity cost between 2008 and 2009 went up 7%. This is in Kentucky. But the industrial rate went up 10%, and this is where the environment really begins to start causing us a problem. Because the real problem is relative cost. We look back over the last 20 years, Kentucky, first column there, we look pretty good compared to the nation as a whole on average or industrial rates. Average, by the way, includes residential electricity rates and commercial electricity rates. The last 10 years don't look so hot. That's why I colored them blue. I'm kind of blue about the figures. One of the key factors, one of the key tools that Kentucky has used to attract businesses has been low-cost electricity. You will notice that electricity in Kentucky has been rising for the last 10 years, a heck of a lot faster than the nation as a whole. This undermines Kentucky's ability to attract manufacturing. This undermines Kentucky's economy over the long term. And it's not due to coal prices. Let me just take you very quickly to the bottom line here, where it says coal. 2004, $60 a ton. 2009, $51 a ton. That increase in electricity rates was not due to the price of coal. It has to do with some things having to do with regulations and burdens that are placed on those power plants that burn coal. And those regulations aren't about to go away. They're about to get a lot more stringent. So we've got scary stuff. I'm not going to spend my time dealing with all of these different kinds of scary things that we have in the environment today. But these are some of the things that I could have talked about. Climate change is there in the middle. I've already addressed the socioeconomic changes. I've started to address the threats to the Kentucky economy. We're going to deal with the natural disasters in a moment. But these are all things that are happening. And by the way, Kentucky is very interesting. If you look at that document, the what is it, missions report, the goals report that you put out last year, Mike, right? You know, Kentucky prides itself on its clean environment and we see ourselves as having done very well. We've got that's the #1 achievement. We maintained a nice, clean environment. That's certainly true. Interesting point. This one comes from a natural resource department manager in Missouri. They're doing very nicely. They're taking care of things in Missouri. They're keeping things nice and clean and preserving parks and natural lands and so on. There's only one little problem. The deer are migrating north, and so are the armadillos. And they're a little bit worried about what's going to happen to the revenues they get from their deer hunting season, because they don't think that the people who've been coming to Missouri to hunt deer are going to want to hunt armadillo. These are species migrating because of temperature changes. But really, I'm an optimist. Even though I have to admit we could still face a train wreck. And I had to put that photograph in because it's one of my favorites. Things are changing all around us. There are all sorts of things going on in the world. It's very, very hard to keep tabs on all of them. What we're really facing is a situation in which we have what I would call, what economists have called radical uncertainty. And it's now increasingly the new normal. I suggest to you that we have here possibly an individual leaning up against, pushing hard against, what looks like a solid wall, cement block or something like it. But what happens next? We don't have the answers to any of these questions. We don't have the answers to any of those questions, and we also don't have an answer to the question about why we should care about this guy pushing up against that wall. We're very, very uncertain about what's going on in our environment. And radical uncertainty can do a number of different things. It could lead to total indifference. Heck with it. Look, I don't know. I can't pay attention to this. It's too complicated. Why bother? I can't do anything. I can't get anybody to agree with me. Does it sound like a certain Congress, you know? You could get totally immobilized. Or you could start planning for the worst, trying to take control. If this is an individual doing that, we tend to call him or her a survivalist, I think. But when it's a community doing it, this may be a very, very positive thing to try and take control. Certainly that's the example that we have in Paducah that you just heard. I'm not going to dwell on this except to say, you look at these two paths here, one ends up horizontal, the other one ends up diving. One says that we have to get our admissions to a stable level and keep them there. The other one says that we have to make them drop over time. Do I need to tell you that these two things cost vastly different amounts of money? And when you're listening to people talking about how much it costs to respond to climate change, it's things like this that cause the disagreements. And by and large, the numbers don't have going for them the amount of explanatory background telling you why it is that people disagree, so you get all these numbers being thrown at you, and it's very, very hard to tell what's actually going on. By the way, 350 parts per million, ppm, of carbon concentration is supposedly what we need to avoid a temperature increase that is basically going to cause us to lose Florida. I don't know how else to put it, in terms of sea rise, storms, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, the International Energy Agency is not even trying for that 350, they're only trying for 450. That's presumably what they're going to go out after in Copenhagen. They project the need for an 18% reduction in US emissions in 2020 relative to 2007. You may remember before I was talking about we needed a 15%. Everybody keeps playing with the numbers. So it's very, very hard to keep track of exactly what's happening here. That's going to produce a variety of things that are going to have to go down. Try getting car fleet emissions down by 41%. We're going to have to reduce the amount of driving because we certainly haven't pushed up the per mile mileage by that much yet. Or we're going to have to need a new technology that doesn't emit as much. 90 billion in new energy-related investments. I don't see that as scary. I see that as an opportunity. Question is, how much of it comes to Kentucky?